My babysitter Sophie was my husband's abandoned child. For months, she took care of my kids, completely unaware that the man who walked out on her life was living in the same house. When she finally found out the truth, she looked him in the eyes and said, "You don't deserve to know me." All right, so this is probably the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me, and I still can't wrap my head around it. I don't even know how to process what I found out, so I guess I'll just start from the beginning. So, I'm a mom of two little kids, a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old. Love them to death, but let's be real, parenting is exhausting. My husband, Mark, and I both work full-time, and between school drop-offs, work, and trying to keep our house from looking like a tornado hit it, we were barely staying afloat. A few months ago, I finally caved and decided to hire a babysitter. Not full-time, just a few evenings a week so I could actually have a minute to breathe and maybe remember what silence sounds like. I asked around, and one of my friends recommended this girl, Sophie. She was 17, a high school senior, super responsible, and apparently great with kids. My friend swore by her, said she'd been babysitting for years, and that she was saving up for college. So I thought, great, perfect, let's do this. The first time Sophie came over, everything seemed totally normal. She was polite, well-spoken, and had that kind of calm energy that makes kids instantly love you. My two little terrors took to her immediately, which was a miracle because they usually act like tiny demons whenever we try to introduce them to new people. But here's the thing. From the moment I saw her, I had this weird, nagging feeling. You know when you see someone and your brain is like, wait, have I met you before? But you know you haven't? That was me with Sophie. She just looked familiar. Like I'd seen her face before, but I couldn't place it. At first, I figured maybe she just reminded me of someone from high school or something. It happens, right? So I pushed the feeling aside and went about my business. Sophie kept coming over a couple of times a week, and honestly, she was amazing. My kids adored her. She was patient, never got frustrated, and even somehow convinced my 4-year-old to eat broccoli, which I thought was literally impossible. But that weird feeling? It never really went away. And then one night, something happened that made my stomach drop. Sophie was helping my kids with a puzzle at the kitchen table while I was cleaning up. And she laughed. I know, that sounds so dumb. But the way she laughed, it was just eerily familiar. Like I had heard that laugh before, years ago. And then I really looked at her. Really looked at her. And suddenly, I knew exactly why she seemed so familiar. She looked just like someone from my husband's past. Someone he never talked about. And that's when I started putting the pieces together. All right, so after that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't just a passing thought anymore, it was gnawing at me. And look, I'm not usually the type to overthink things. I've got 2 kids, a job, and a house that always seems to be a disaster no matter how much I clean. I don't have time to sit around and analyze teenage babysitters. But this was different. Because every time Sophie smiled, every time she spoke, there was this eerie, almost haunting familiarity. It wasn't like seeing a stranger who just happened to resemble someone I knew. It was more than that. So I started paying closer attention. I wasn't weird about it or anything, I didn't want to freak her out, but I started asking little questions here and there. Casual stuff. Where do you go to school? Do you have any siblings? What do your parents do? And that's when I noticed something. Whenever I brought up her family, she got weird. Not in an obvious way, but her answers were always vague. She told me she lived with her mom, just the 2 of them. No siblings. No mention of a dad. I tried to keep it light, just nodding along. But internally, I was spiraling. Because by this point, I was pretty sure I knew who she looked like. And if I was right, then there was no way in hell this was a coincidence. See, years ago, before Mark and I even met, he had this serious long-term girlfriend, Claire. I didn't know much about her, just that they dated when they were young, and it had ended badly. Mark never talked about her. Like, ever. The one time I had asked about his exes early in our relationship, he brushed it off, saying something about young and dumb mistakes. I didn't push because, honestly, I didn't care. It was ancient history. But the thing is, Sophie? She didn't just look like someone from Mark's past. She looked like Mark's ex-girlfriend. Like, exactly. Same eyes, same nose, same smile. And then I did the math. Sophie was 17. Mark and Claire had broken up 18 years ago. Oh, my God. I felt like I was going to be sick. Was it possible? Could Mark have had a child and never told me? Had he, oh my God, abandoned his own kid? I kept telling myself I was overthinking it, that there had to be another explanation. But deep down, I knew. I had to be sure, though. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I snooped. One night, after Mark fell asleep, I grabbed my phone and went deep into the internet. I found Claire's old social media, which was basically a ghost town except for a few old pictures, and scrolled until I found one where she was holding a baby. The baby's name? Sophie. And that's when it hit me like a freight train. Sophie wasn't just some random babysitter. She was my husband's secret daughter. And he had never told me. So there I was, sitting in the dark, staring at my phone, heart racing, mind screaming. I had proof. Undeniable proof. Sophie was Mark's daughter. And this man, my husband, the father of my kids, had apparently just pretended she didn't exist for 17 years. I wish I could say I reacted calmly, that I took a deep breath and waited for the right moment to bring it up. But no, that's not what happened. I lost it. I stormed into the bedroom, phone in hand, and shook Mark awake. Who is she? I hissed, shoving the phone in his face. Tell me right now. Mark blinked groggily, squinting at the screen. What? What are you talking about? Sophie, Mark. The girl who's been babysitting our kids for months. The girl who looks exactly like your ex. The girl you abandoned. His face drained of color so fast I thought he might pass out. For a solid 5 seconds, he just stared at me. Like his brain had short-circuited. Like he couldn't believe I'd found out. And then? He sighed. Like I had just caught him sneaking an extra cookie or something. Not like he had a secret daughter. Not like he had lied to me for our entire marriage. I wanted to scream. Okay, he finally said, sitting up. I can explain. Yeah? Explain why the hell you have a child that I didn't know about? Explain why she's in our house, taking care of our kids, and you haven't said a damn thing. He rubbed his face like this was just inconvenient for him. Like I was the one being unreasonable. And then he said something that made my stomach flip. I was hoping you'd never find out. Excuse me? I think that was the moment my rage turned into something deeper. Something colder. Because this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something he forgot to mention. He had deliberately kept this from me. Start talking, I snapped. Now. And that's when I got the whole disgusting story. Mark and Claire had been together when they were young, and when she got pregnant, he panicked. He was barely out of high school, he wasn't ready to be a dad, so he just didn't show up. Didn't answer her calls. Didn't go to the hospital when Sophie was born. Didn't acknowledge her existence. Claire eventually stopped trying, moved away, and raised Sophie on her own. And Mark? He went on with his life like none of it had ever happened. I was nauseous. You just, what? Pretended she didn't exist. Mark had the audacity to look defensive. I was a kid, he muttered. I didn't know what to do. I thought it was better for everyone if I wasn't involved. Better for who, exactly? Certainly not Sophie. Certainly not Claire, who had to raise a baby on her own. And then I remembered something. Sophie didn't know. When I had casually asked her about her family, she said she never met her dad. Which meant she had no idea that the man whose house she had been babysitting in for months was him. Her father. Her deadbeat runaway. Never once their father. I felt sick. What the hell are we supposed to do now, Mark? I asked, my voice shaking. What happens when she finds out? He looked down, picking at a thread on the blanket. She's not going to find out. I laughed. A sharp, humorless sound. Oh, you think so? You think she's not going to notice that her dad is living in this house and just, what? Never say anything? Never figure it out. And that's when it hit me. Sophie had noticed something was weird. She had that same look I did, that feeling of familiarity. That sense that something wasn't adding up. She might not know the full truth, but she knew something was off. And if I could figure it out in a few weeks, how long before she put the pieces together herself? I turned back to Mark, anger boiling over. You need to tell her. He shook his head immediately. No, it'll ruin everything. Oh, so now he cared about ruining things? Now it mattered? She deserves to know. I practically shouted. But Mark just sat there, stubborn, refusing to meet my eyes. That's when I knew. If I didn't do something, if I didn't force this truth out, he was never going to tell her. And that wasn't something I could live with. So, at this point, I knew I was living in some kind of twisted soap opera. My husband had a secret daughter, a daughter he had abandoned, pretended didn't exist, and now she was in my house every week, babysitting our kids. And the worst part? She had no idea. Mark, being the spineless coward he is, wanted to keep it that way. I, however, could not. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized how deeply messed up this was. Sophie was bonding with my kids. She was laughing with them, reading bedtime stories, playing games, and treating them like family because, in a sick, ironic way, they were. And the idea that she was unknowingly spending time with the very man who abandoned her, the same man who had chosen my kids over her, I couldn't stomach it. So I made a decision. If Mark wouldn't tell her the truth, I would. A few days later, I waited until Sophie was over again. I had already planned out what I was going to say, how I was going to approach it without completely breaking her. But, of course, I never got the chance. Because Sophie found out on her own. And it was so much worse than I had imagined. Here's what happened. Sophie was helping the kids clean up their toys when my 6-year-old, completely innocent, said something that shattered everything. My daddy says you're a really good babysitter. Now, to most people, that's a harmless comment. But I saw it hit Sophie in real time. She blinked, stiffened, looked over at me, and then she asked, carefully, your dad? My daughter nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, Daddy says you're the best. His name is Mark. Silence. And I swear, I could actually see the blood drain from Sophie's face. I didn't even have time to react before she slowly turned to me. What did she just say? My heart was pounding. She knew. She didn't know everything, not yet, but her brain was already connecting the dots. And instead of lying, instead of trying to control the damage, I just looked at her and said, we need to talk. We sat in the living room. The kids were upstairs. I was trying to keep myself together, but Sophie, she was barely holding on. Her hands were shaking. Her face was pale. Tell me, she said. Her voice was quiet, unsteady. Tell me the truth. I took a deep breath. Mark is your father. The words hung in the air like poison. Sophie let out a sharp breath, almost like she had been punched in the stomach. She looked away, blinking rapidly. I could see her fighting the truth, wanting to reject it, wanting to believe it wasn't real. But deep down, I think she already knew. Because she whispered, more to herself than to me, I knew something was weird. I swallowed hard. I only found out recently. Mark never told me about you. I didn't know until I saw you and put it together. She didn't say anything for a long time. And then, her expression changed. Her sadness, her shock, turned into something darker. Anger. That son of a bitch, she whispered. And then she stood up. I didn't stop her. I knew where she was going. Straight to Mark. Mark was in his office when Sophie stormed in. I was right behind her, but I didn't say a word. This wasn't my moment. This was hers. And when Mark looked up and saw her face, he knew. Sophie. Shut up. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp. You don't get to talk, she snapped. You don't get to say my name like we have any kind of relationship. Mark exhaled, running a hand down his face. I wanted to tell you. Lie. Sophie's laugh was bitter. No, you didn't. If you wanted to tell me, you would have done it 17 years ago. Mark looked away. Sophie took a step closer. Do you have any idea what it was like growing up without a dad? Do you know how many times I asked my mom about you? How many times I wondered what was so wrong with me that my own father didn't want me? Mark flinched. He actually flinched. Good. Sophie let out a shaky breath. And then I find out that not only do you exist, you have a whole other family. Kids you actually stuck around for. Mark opened his mouth, but she cut him off. Don't even try to defend yourself. There's nothing you can say that's going to make this okay. Silence. Then Sophie let out a small, bitter laugh. You know what's funny? I spent years wondering about you. Hoping I'd meet you someday. Thinking maybe, you had a reason. But now that I know the truth, she shook her head. I don't want to know you at all. Mark looked devastated. Sophie, don't. She stepped back. And then, with a final glance, she turned and walked away. I followed her to the door, heartbreaking for her. She paused before stepping out. Thank you for telling me. I nodded. You deserved to know. And then she was gone. That night, Mark tried to talk to me. Tried to explain. Tried to act like he was the victim. But I couldn't even look at him. Because in that moment, I realized something. This wasn't just about Sophie. This was about who he was as a person. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be married to him at all. After Sophie left, the house felt wrong. Like the air had been sucked out of it. Like something heavy was pressing down on my chest. Mark was sitting in the living room, his head in his hands. He hadn't said a word since Sophie stormed out. But I wasn't about to comfort him. Not after what he did. Because here's the thing, I wasn't just mad about the secret child he never told me about. I was mad about the kind of person he had proven himself to be. A coward. A liar. A man who had abandoned his own daughter and then tried to pretend she didn't exist. And the worst part? He still didn't seem to get it. You need to fix this, I finally said. Mark let out a bitter laugh. How? She hates me. Yeah, no kidding, I snapped. You disappeared from her life for 17 years and only spoke to her by accident. What did you think would happen? That she'd throw herself into your arms and call you daddy. Mark winced, but I wasn't done. You didn't even try, Mark. You never reached out, never sent a card, never checked if she was okay. And now, you're acting like this is some tragic accident instead of the consequence of your own choices. He exhaled sharply. I was a kid when it happened, Emily. I shook my head. You were a kid then. But what about when you turned 20? Or 25? Or 30? What about every single year after she was born when you could have done something? Silence. I could see it in his face. He had nothing. No excuse. No justification. Because deep down, he knew I was right. And honestly, that was the worst part. Because if he had ever regretted it, if he had ever wanted to make it right, he would have. But he didn't. And now? Now it was too late. The next few days were tense. Mark barely spoke. I barely wanted to speak to him. But the person I was really worried about was Sophie. She hadn't texted. Hadn't called. I didn't even know if she was okay. And I wanted to give her space. I really did. But I also couldn't just sit around doing nothing. So I sent her a message. I know you probably don't want to talk right now, but I just wanted to check on you. No pressure to respond. Just know I'm here if you need anything. I didn't expect a reply. But a few hours later, my phone buzzed. Sophie, I'm okay. Thanks for checking. I stared at the screen, debating whether to say more. But I didn't want to push. So I just sent back, anytime. That night, Mark tried again. I don't want to lose my family over this, he said quietly. I looked at him, really looked at him, and realized something. I already had. Because how was I supposed to look at him the same way after this? How was I supposed to trust him when I knew what he was capable of? I wasn't naive. I knew people made mistakes. But this? This wasn't just a mistake. This was a lifetime of choices that he had made again and again. And suddenly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be another one of his choices. I need time, I said. Mark nodded like he understood, but I could see the fear in his eyes. Because we both knew what time really meant. This was the beginning of the end. The next day, I got a call. From Claire. Sophie's mom. I hesitated before picking up. I had never actually spoken to her before. I didn't know what she was going to say. But the second I answered, she got right to the point. I just wanted to say thank you. I blinked. For what? For telling Sophie the truth, Claire said. For not covering for him. for being the one person who actually put her first. I let out a breath I didn't even realize I was holding. Of course. There was a pause. Then she added, she doesn't want anything to do with Mark. But she said you were different. She said you actually cared. Something in my chest ached. Because the truth was, I did care. I barely knew Sophie, but I cared about her more than the man who had created her. And I wasn't about to stop now. I wish I could say things got easier after that phone call. That I had some grand epiphany, packed my bags, and walked out the door with my dignity intact. But real life? It's messy. And this mess was far from over. A few days after Claire called me, Mark tried one last time to fix things. We were in the kitchen. The kids were asleep. I was exhausted from carrying the emotional weight of this disaster while still pretending everything was fine in front of my children. Mark sat across from me, eyes heavy with guilt. I know I screwed up, he started. I didn't even react. I was beyond hearing his excuses. But I want to make things right. I finally looked at him. And how do you plan to do that? He hesitated. I could try reaching out to Sophie. Maybe if I apologize, maybe if I explain. I laughed. Actually laughed. Mark, you don't get it, do you? I shook my head. You had 17 years to reach out. And now that Sophie knows the truth, she doesn't want you in her life. He flinched. That's not fair. She didn't even give me a chance. She doesn't know you won. Silence. And then I said the words that had been circling in my mind since the night this all blew up. I don't think I can stay married to you. Mark's face crumbled. But I meant it. Because even if he magically fixed things with Sophie, which he wouldn't, this wasn't just about her. It was about the fact that I didn't know who I was married to. He had lied to me for years. Lied by omission, yes, but a lie is a lie. And if he could hide something this big, what else had he hidden? What else would he hide? I didn't trust him anymore. And without trust, there was nothing left. I didn't leave right away. It's not that simple when you have kids. But over the next few weeks, things between Mark and me unraveled. The resentment grew. The silences stretched. Until finally, one night, I said it out loud. I want a divorce. And you know what? He didn't even fight me on it. Maybe he knew I was right. Maybe he was too exhausted to pretend otherwise. Maybe he realized that no matter what he did, I would never look at him the same way again. And honestly, that was his problem, not mine. The last time I saw Sophie, it was different. I had been texting her every so often, just checking in. Nothing heavy, just enough so she knew I was still here if she needed me. And one day, she asked if we could meet. We sat in a quiet coffee shop. She looked older somehow, like she had aged 10 years in just a few weeks. Are you really leaving him? She asked. I nodded. Yeah. She let out a small, humorless laugh. Good. I hesitated. How are you holding up? She shrugged. It sucks. But honestly, I think it would have sucked worse if I had spent my whole life wondering about him, only to find out who he really is. I didn't have anything to say to that. Because she was right. After a pause, she added, I just wanted to say, thanks. For telling me the truth. For actually caring. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Anytime, Sophie. And I meant it. A month after Mark and I officially separated, I got a text from Claire. It was a screenshot of a court filing. Mark was being sued for 17 years of unpaid child support. I stared at the screen for a long moment before I started laughing. Because, in the end, he was finally facing real consequences. And I had absolutely zero sympathy. I won't pretend this was some kind of happy ending. Divorce is hard. Losing trust in someone you loved is gut-wrenching. But I'll tell you this, I don't regret a single thing. Because I got out. Because Sophie got the truth. Because, for the first time in a long time, I finally felt like I was doing the right thing. And that was enough.